On today's installment of Locked On Texans, why do we have the utmost faith in Bobby Slowik, and what made Danielle Hunter the most appealing to the Houston Texans?
Start the show!
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers, to this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day right now, maybe every other day. We are in the off season, but we really appreciate you guys for stopping by. And if you are a first-time listener and viewer, we will get back to 5 days a week. We promise eventually, but please do us a favor and subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And thank you to all of our returning listeners coming back as Cody and I continue to talk Texans. That's the man with the plan on the other side of the screen, Texas Credential Media member, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. I'm your Texans football analyst, Johnson Sports Guy Hickman. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey guys, make every moment more right now. Every new customer can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Cody, we're talking about fate. I know it ain't Sunday. Or, black folks, we do Bible study. You pick a day of the week. We do Bible
Any day.
But fate and Bobby Slowik, take it away.
Yes, sir. And the reason why I wanted us to talk about our faith in Bobby Slowik is because, look, on Friday, came on this show, of course, and I talked about seeing the Houston Texans at OTAs take the field for the very first time on the offensive side of the ball. And speaking of OTAs, today marks the start of mandatory minicamp for the Houston Texans. So everybody, as of right now, who is on the Houston Texans roster would definitely be at attendance as of right now, unless they're dealing with some type of injuries. I think the only guys that we have not seen so far throughout this offseason has been Titus Howard, Laramie Tunsil, and Shaq Mason, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm missing somebody else, please forgive me. But, outside of those three, man, everybody's been inside of NRG Stadium, and those three guys will definitely probably have an opportunity to see them for the very first time this offseason, especially Titus Howard, knowing that he took this entire offseason to get himself back to the player that he was before the injuries derailed his 2023 campaign. But going back to OTAs on Thursday, it was the very first time that we saw the presumed first team take the field. Quarterback C.J. Stroud, your offensive backfield, Joe Mixon, Dalton Schultz, the wide receiving core. You had Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs lined up out wide, and then you had Tank Dell in the slot. And John, remember I came on this show and I said, look, I remember looking at that and thinking to myself, there is not going to be a defense in this league who's going to have an opportunity to stop this offense. And then that transitioned into why I believe the Texans will have the number one offense in the league. However, throughout all of that, I forgot one important thing, and that was faith in Bobby Slowik and his opportunity, his mindset, his development into incorporating the talent that he have. And I believe that this is a golden opportunity for Bobby Slowik because first and foremost, John, the one thing that I love most about Bobby Slowik was the fact that when you take a look at the success that he had last year, he was able to do that with a hand being dealt that wasn't that good, especially considering the number of injuries that the Houston Texans had to overcome, i.e., for the sake of this argument, take a look at what he was able to do in the rushing attack. I understand it wasn't that great. I understand it wasn't as good as we thought going into the 2023 season. But how the way he was able to utilize Devin Singletary, especially given the fact that your offensive line was going through a variety of injuries, he was able to utilize Singletary and not only help the Houston Texans rushing attack, but also helped him have a career year. And you saw him put his players in a position to succeed. Same thing with the wide receiving core. You know, there was moments where injuries derailed that wide receiving core, especially when you take a look at the loss of Tank Dale for the final 8 games of last season. However, we saw him utilize every single wide receiver throughout the season, or majority of every single wide receiver throughout the season, to put them in a position to succeed, i.e. Noah Brown. Maybe he had that 2-3 game stretch where he had about 350 yards, and he was just dominant. And a lot of the credit that we saw always went back to Bobby Slowik. Now, you taking a look at the fact that this is an offensive coordinator who could possibly be in the best position in 2024, John. I think I speak for the both of us when I say the faith in Bobby Slowik to incorporate all of this talent is at 100%.
It's really the same as last year. That's what's fun is last year I would say all the time, you know, we got a group of guys in the receiver room and the tight end room and the running back room that we feel like have good skill sets, and they're all elite at something. And our job is to take advantage of what they're elite at. You know, how do we make sure that what fits them gets shown to the world and showcased, and, you know, we get a chance to use that in the pass game and in the run game. And, I mean, we got a quarterback that really gives us no limitations in that regard. We can do all kinds of stuff to make sure that, you know, whatever we're calling and however we use guys, we're making sure that they're doing their strengths. And that's really what it all comes down to.
That was Bobby Slowik talking about what this team needs to do to be in high-powered offense for 2024. I think my biggest takeaway from that was we have a quarterback that takes away no limitations at the quarterback position. Talking about C.J. Stroud, and I think that's huge. I think for the second half of last year, that was the thought. If you remember, after the Panther game, we saw Houston really try to divert from forcing a run. We also saw them kind of make that move and shift over from Dameon Pierce to Devin Singletary more so full-time. And after that game, we saw Dameon Pierce have games with 0 carries. So Devin Singletary was a full-time starter at running back. But you saw Houston go out there and have games like the Cincy game. You saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. You saw Bobby Slowik from the sideline really trust C.J. Stroud to just go out there slinging and win them games. So no limitations from the quarterback position, I think, is the biggest from that. My biggest takeaway from Bobby Slowik, and also just understanding that we do have the tools, the talents, and I hate saying this about humans, but the shiny new toys to go out there and showcase them, right? We got Tank. We got Stephon. We got Nico. We got Dalton, brought him back. We drafted Cade Stover. We still got, Dameon Pierce, but without Dameon Pierce, we got Joe Mixon. We got an offense that is talented from top to bottom. We got Laramie. We got Titus. Hopefully, we can throw Kenyon Green in there. We got Shaq Mason. We have some players that we can hold up the offensive line, and I have to go out there and showcase it. The best way for him to showcase it in one area that I would love to see Bobby just get better at is play calling in situational play calling. That's about it. And I do think that he was handicapped a little bit last year simply because after the Denver Bronco game, I mean, there was no other receiver that can consistently create separation outside of Nico. But throughout the entire year, I think if we're honest about it, you got CJ, he's new, Bobby Slowik's new at his role. There's a lot of new moving pieces that came into Houston last year, and it took them a while to figure it out. And again, I think the biggest thing that happened for Houston, the biggest blessing in disguise, was losing to the Panthers and how they lost to the Panthers. Because before that, I think you can consider a little bit up and down. And it was an up and down season for Houston offensively a lot last year. But you had games like the Steelers game where it was like, oh, wow, okay, well, this is great situational play calling for 4 quarters by Bobby Slowik. Then you have the Falcon game. Then you have the Saints game. The whole NFC South was just up and down, and I believe Houston went 2-2. They won against Tampa. They won against New Orleans. They lost against Atlanta. They lost against Carolina. Putting it all together from the sidelines is what's going to take this team from top 10 to top 5 to potentially, as we like to kind of say, they have the opportunity to do so, number 1 offense in the NFL, right? When you look around the league, you got offenses that are very high powered. Detroit with Ben Johnson, whoever is the OC, I can't think of his name right now for Green Bay, Kyle Shanahan in San Fran.
Got Miami, who was number one last year.
Miami, who's number one in last year. And in the regular season, you saw them have some great play calling depending on the situation. Third down, right? 3rd and 5 is different from 3rd and 2. 2nd and 6 is different from 2nd and 8. So you got to have positive yards, of course, but just understanding the smaller details on how to be the defense. That's why I have a little bit more faith in Bobby Slowik this year compared to last year. I do think there was some unknowns about Bobby. Mm-hmm. And I think it was some unknowns about how he wants to incorporate his offense for Houston. And those unknowns, we saw it. I mean, outside of Nico and Tank, I mean, it was hard to find a third receiver for 17 games. And once Tank went down, it was hard to find a second receiver for the remaining of the season. It was hard to find consistency in the run game. It was hard to find some of the things that we expected Bobby to establish coming over from San Fran and kind of replicating some of that made San Francisco successful. It was hard. Now you saw Houston, and again, credit to Nick Caserio, go out there and say, well, last year was hard running the ball. Let's make sure that we get healthier this offseason. Let's make sure that if somebody goes down, we have the talent and we believe and trust can come in and help us get over that hump. Let's also make sure we have a functional, dynamic running back. Let's also make sure we have 3 options, just in case if an option goes down, Lord forbid, the second option is just as good as the first, or the third is just as good as the second, or the fourth is still a very good option. Let's make sure we're able to do that offensively. No Dalton Schultz when we have Brevin Jordan cased up. Let's make sure that we have options. So some of those roadblocks that we went through last year, we could just kind of run right through them this year and not have too much of an issue. That's why I have faith in Bobby. Nick Caserio did a very good job of giving Bobby what he needed to be successful. So we'll see those sample size games, the Tampa game, the Pittsburgh game, the Cleveland Browns playoff game, the Indianapolis Colts game to go to the playoffs. Some of those sample size moments throughout the 17-game season, 18-week NFL year, we'll see that more often now because you got the tools to do it. It's winner take all season in the NBA with the finals, NHL as well. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Who doesn't love wins? Who like, I love to win, right? Cody, you like to win. The Texans like to win. They won 10 games last year. Now they want to win 11. Everybody likes to win. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So if you thought Houston, because they won 10 games last year, 10.5, do you take that? The over-under? Do you look at 11? Do you look at 12, right? CJ Stroud, what's the over-under for TDs for next year? You can do that as well. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook.
As we continue here on this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans, John, I think it's time for us to turn our attention to the defense. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about why we believe this defense could be the best in the league. And majority of that comes when you look at of course, the improvements, how much Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans had an opportunity to literally just revamp this defense. And I must admit, going into this offseason, I definitely thought that when you take a look at all 3 levels, the one position that would have went through the least amount of changes would have been the defensive line. When you take a look at what they did last year in terms of sacks numbers, they set a franchise record of 46. The defensive line accounted for, I believe, 38 or 39 of that 46. When you take a look at some of the best guys up front, you take a look at Winter Anderson Jr., Jonathan Gennard, Sheldon Rankins, Malik Collins. The one thing wrong with that statement, 3 of the 4 guys that I just mentioned are gone, and the defensive line went through the most changes. And the number one change that took place throughout this whole entire offseason was the arrival of Danielle Hunter, who has by far established himself as one of the best pass rushers in the league over the last 8 years. I mean, you take a look at Danielle Hunter. In 5 out of those 8 years, he had an opportunity to record double-digit sacks, and last year alone, he set a career high in 16 and a half. So, John, we know about his sack numbers. We know what Danielle Hunter can do for this defense. However, last week I had an opportunity to ask defensive coordinator Matt Burke, what are some of the intangibles outside of his sacks did you see in Danielle Hunter that made him so pleasing to this organization? Coach, the defensive front alone did a really good job at getting after the quarterback last year, but now that you add Danielle Hunter, what are some of the individual intangibles that you are seeing in him that you guys didn't have last year?
Well, I would just say, anytime that you have a rusher like him that is going to command attention from an offense, it just changes protections and how you do things, and that just sort of unlocks, other parts of the rush, I would say. So, when we are looking to attack protections, probably the biggest thing is just how predictable can you get the protection. If you have it's like anything in football, right? If you know what the other team's doing or has a good sense of, the percentages are pretty high that they're going to do it this way, then you have an answer for that. So, if they're focusing attention on Hunter or Will or whoever, it sort of unlocks some other things we can do or how we manipulate some of those protections. So I think just having just his presence and, again, his history of what he's done in the league, and I think teams are going to have to account for where he is and how we're using him, and then kind of how we play off that is going to just be sort of on us. But really all those guys, Danico is a unique style of rusher, again, obviously with Will, Mario Edwards, all the guys that we have are just, we can move pieces around. I think it's just trying to put guys in different spots to either dictate protections or to win matchups that we like.
Shout out to Matt Burke for giving Mario Edwards some recognition and love. I am curious to see what Mario Edwards can be for Houston alongside of Dylan Horton, who will be coming back at some point soon. I'm curious to see how those two dynamics match up for the Houston Texans and if they are able to be a part of that pressure-creating defensive front that I think could potentially lead Houston to being a top 12 defense in the NFL.
You say top 12. I think you might have to put that top 10, but we'll discuss in the next segment. But, John, the one thing that I took from Matt Burke's statement, I looked at it from a standpoint. I do wonder how much did the addition of Danielle Hunter will help the Houston Texans get more creative with their blitz packages. I love how he talked about the attention that Danielle Hunter is getting, and I look at it from a standpoint. When you take a look at the attention that Danielle Hunter is getting, combine that with the attention that Will Anderson Jr. has already gotten in this league. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this young man in his very first season finished his rookie year. If he wasn't number 5, he was no lower than 6 for most double teams on that defensive front. How much, at least when you take a look at this front four along, and like I say, along with the creative blitz packages that we're going to see, how much better did the addition of Danielle Hunter is just going to open up this Texans defense in general?
I think the addition of Danielle Hunter can allow Houston to win without having to throw a lot of blitz packages. Mm-hmm. I think he's that good up front. I'm curious to see how creative they'll get. And the same way we talk about the offense getting creative and helping out CJ by allowing things to be a little bit easier, we got to talk about that with the defense as well. So when you look at creative matchups, maybe stunts, blitzes, right? Outside, inside, through the middle, however you want to look at it, you do want to see Houston help out their guys, right? Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter. But what I like about Hunter so much, man, is I think he's a guy that can win one-on-1, one-on-2. And if he's not winning the rep 103, you got somebody else winning because you can't block all 4 guys up front. And we've seen guys like Aaron Donald get that treatment, and I think peak Danielle Hunter can give you that same. He may not get 1v3, but 1v2, and ultimately I think he's a player that's so good anything additional that you do to help out that D front, you're allowing your defense, especially the front seven, to create the pressure that you want them to create to help the back end of your defense. So I think he's that guy that can, again, command the double teams, beat the double teams, destroy the double teams. And just like last year, but just a little bit better, you got other guys benefiting off of that. Texan games will be packed next year. They're going to be jumping as well. You ain't going to miss none of the action. The atmosphere is going to get crazy. If you have never tailgated before, this is probably the perfect year to do so. But you don't want to just tailgate and not go watch the Houston Texans whoop up on some other teams. You definitely want to get your ticket to get in the NRG Stadium, and no better place to do that than Game Time. Game Time makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer to the tip-off. So, if you're out there tailgating and somebody says, hey, man, I'll send you some money to get in the game, you can still purchase tickets with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, along with their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets, along with NBA, MLB, and much more. You can even buy tickets on theater, comedy events near you as well, along with concerts. Don't miss out on the fun because you are waiting. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase.
You all can be on the offensive side of the ball, but now that you've been in 2 weeks of OTAs, what have you seen on the defensive side of the ball?
Sheesh. I ain't gonna lie, them guys over there, I'm glad I'm on their team. I just say that. I'm glad I'm on their team, man. And it's a lot of young, hungry guys that's out there flying around. Them boys hungry. They all run real fast. And they physical. So at the point of attack, man, that's what they preach. Point of attack and, attacking the football and creating turnovers. And one thing about them that I've been seeing and that I'm very impressed with is that, one, the communication of what they have with each other, and also, two, they, the chemistry that they didn't build already, despite, what they didn't have before, man. So I think it's been a great thing for me to see.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. I don't know about you guys, but I am very excited to see what Joe Mixon has been seeing during the early stages of OTAs, man. Because if you think about it, John, you saw his reaction when our good friend Big Sarge asked him about what has he been seeing from the defensive side of the ball. You saw and heard his reaction. But keep in mind that whatever he's been seeing, whatever he's been experiencing, they have been looking that good while the team hasn't had any type of contact practice. And I think we can all agree that this defense is nowhere near complete, especially when you take a look at that defensive backfield. So, John, we got to have this argument, man. I'm not going to sit here and say that the way this roster is constructed, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to have the number one best defensive team in the league, because there's still questions in the safety unit, and we still don't know as of right now who's going to take the helm as CB number 2. But I do believe right now, 100% confident in saying that this team can definitely be a top 10 defensive team in the league.
I gotta wait and see.
Really?
I gotta wait and see. This is the part that I hate because we are in June. I just have to wait and see. Now, credit the Houston Texans were 14th last year in total defense.
It was 14th.
You only allowed a little under 97 rushing yards per game. They got much better in that category.
There was 170 last year. I mean, in
2022.
2022.
Right.
170.
So much better. Last year and even right now, there are still question marks about the back end of that defense. I think the front end of that defense is going to cause and create a lot of pressure. And if they don't result in sacks, we may see the results of errant throws where you can get some interceptions and maybe fumbles. But there's still question marks about this defense right now. I think so, and I think that's fair. 14th is a good spot to be in. Do I think they can be a top 10? Well, they got Danielle Hunter. They got Al Shair. You get another year of Christian Harris. You get another year of Will Anderson. You get another year of Derek Stingley healthy. You get another year of some of these important pieces that's been here and can continue to grow. And then you add the talent, Autry, of course. So it's not unfathomable. They can definitely be a top 10 defense. I just got the questions about the back end that I want to wait until I see preseason before I make my judgment.
How much of that, the questions that we have, can literally be solved if Jalen Petrie get back to the player he was in his rookie season?
I think a lot.
Of course, Jimmy Ward just stays healthy.
I think a lot. But I'm also the same person that says I think once the end of the year rolls around and we look at the snap count, I think Kalen Bullock will play more snaps than the other rookies. So that's why I'm going to continue to stand until I see training camp, preseason, what these guys are doing against other teams that warrants me to say, man, Jalen Petrie looks a whole lot better. Man, Jimmy Ward looks a whole lot healthier. Until then, I'm only going based off when I last saw them play football. And it was question marks. So they can definitely crack top 10. They got three major additions: Hunter, Autry, Shair. Got guys getting better, but those additions alone, I think, helps them get from 14 to 12, 11, 10.
That's fair.
Yeah, they got to do it on the back end though. They need a CB2, an unquestionable CB2, to play alongside Derek Stingley Jr., who I think is going to have a phenomenal year this year. We're going to look at him and say, man, is he an all-pro cornerback? Question marks are still there. Thank you guys for watching and listening and tuning in to the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast and watch your podcast. Also follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.